Okay, take two because the first one was too long. All right, today we start Proverbs. I'm very, very excited about this. I've spent the last two terms of Bible college learning about Proverbs, so now I'm going to teach you guys about some Proverbs stuff. We're going to be looking at Proverbs for the rest of the term, and we're going to be looking at it thematically. So looking each week at a different theme that comes up in the book of Proverbs. Yeah, you might be thinking to yourself, well, what is a proverb and why are we doing this? A proverb is a short sentence drawn from long experience. A short sentence drawn from long experience. We'll talk more about that in a second. But what are Proverbs for? Proverbs are there to help us to live well. They help us to live a good life. That's what the Proverbs are for. Proverbs is one of probably three books in the Bible that are wisdom literature. So Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job, they're the kind of traditional wisdom literature books. You could also include some of the Psalms as was wisdom, probably Song of Songs as well as wisdom. But Proverbs is one of those books, and as wisdom literature, it's there to help you to live well. I'm going to tell you just four things about the Proverbs, because I think they're important to notice before you start reading them. Firstly, Proverbs is just one of the books of wisdom literature, and it's not the end of the story. So an example of a proverb that you might know is Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. It says, "Trust in the Lord with all of your heart, lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to him, and he will make your paths straight." Now that's true, but that wasn't true for Job, because he did submit to the Lord in all of his ways, and he didn't have a straight path. He actually had a really difficult life, even though he did submit to God. So firstly, they're just one of the books of wisdom literature, and they need to be kept in balance with all of the other bits of wisdom literature. The second thing is that Proverbs are just based on experiences from life. Proverbs are based on observations from life. That's really important to understand. So Proverbs 6:6 is an example. The author says, "Go and look at the ant, you lazy person. Consider its ways and be wise. It's got no commander, no overseer, no ruler, and yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest." And so he says, go and watch what the ant does in nature. It stores during summer so that it has food in winter, even though it has no boss or supervisor to tell it to do that. And then the point of that for us is to not be lazy, but to be like the ant. And so the Proverbs are observations based on life. This is why some of the Proverbs were probably originally written by non-Jewish people who didn't believe in Yahweh as their God. So there's a couple of Proverbs that we probably took from the Egyptians. And that's okay, because Proverbs are just observations of life. It's short sentences drawing from long experience. And that's perfectly fine. There's also a chapter in Proverbs which was written by a king called King Lemuel, chapter 31. And he's never listed anywhere else in the Bible. So he probably was not a Jewish king. And the fact that he's written in our Bible is okay, because Proverbs are just based on observations of life. Thirdly, Proverbs aren't promises. I think that's important to keep in mind. The Bible's full of promises from God, but the Proverbs are not some of those promises. So for example, the Bible says, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. And that's a promise from God. He's going to be with us forever. But then the Proverbs say, start children off on the way that they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. Meaning, if you raise your kid to know who God is, they won't walk away from it. But our experience tells us that that's not always true. I could tell you of lots of kids who were raised to know who God was, who did walk away from it. So it's not a promise from God, it's a proverb. It's what usually is the case, based on observations. And then fourthly, we need to balance the Proverbs with each other. Because if you just read one proverb on one particular theme, then you're not getting the full breadth of what the Proverbs says about that theme. So let me give you an example. Proverbs 26 says, "Do not answer a fool according to their foolishness, or you will be just like him." But then the very next line he says, "Answer a fool according to his foolishness, or he will be wise in his own eyes." And so what do we do? Do we answer them or do we not answer them? Well, sometimes you should answer them. Sometimes you shouldn't answer them. And so you have to balance out the Proverbs with each other. Okay, so they're the four things I wanted to tell you. We're looking at Proverbs based on the themes, but rather than kind of reading it chapter by chapter, because Proverbs is all messed up. And the reason that Proverbs is all messed up is because life is all messed up. One minute you have to make a decision about who your friends are. The next minute you have to make a decision about what to eat for dinner, and then you have to decide whether you're going to go to this school or that school and get this job or that job. And so life is messed up, and so are the Proverbs. But we're going to be unmessing the mess and looking at Proverbs based on themes. So every week we have a new theme. And every week there are 4 questions you should ask yourself. These are in your booklet. And what are some Proverbs that particularly grab your attention and why? What is the big idea across the Proverbs that you've considered? What questions, if any, are in your mind about the meaning or message of these Proverbs? And then finally, have you ever lived out the Proverbs, the wisdom of the Proverbs you've considered? Have you seen others living out that wisdom? Tell a story. So there you go. That's how we're going to be reading Proverbs. Like I said at the start, I'm very, very excited to be reading the Proverbs because they're so easy to understand and they're so helpful for living a good life. So enjoy it. I'll see you guys next week.